Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. We're actually going to be talking about something that really hasn't ever been discussed before, because this type of science has not been performed before. Everybody's heard about zinc, especially post-COVID. Zinc was one of the things that people were told to maintain adequate levels of, along with vitamin D3. Some people say vitamin C, and so on and so forth. Zinc is a mineral, a very, very important mineral that has an electrolytic capacity in our body and is responsible for a variety of things. Other than the RDA, there's really no target for what we should be thinking is a healthy level of zinc. I mean, today we know that for 25 hydroxy vitamin D, the place to be, the sweet spot, is above 40 and probably a little bit below 80. And really, that varies by some unique genetic variants. Dark-skinned people like myself tend to need more vitamin D3 orally. We're talking about supplementing now, right? Sun is a different story. To reach those targets than a fair-skinned person. And I'm sure there's some uniqueness to zinc as it relates to different people absorbing it differently. And we're going to learn that here in just a couple moments. But before we do that, we have to thank our title sponsor, and that's Legendary Foods. Legendary Foods set out to make a healthy alternative to the Pop-Tart. Hence, they created the tasty pastry, but it's become so much more. The tasty pastry has less than 1 gram of sugar, 20 grams of high quality protein. For those of us who are low carb or keto, 4 to 5 net carbs, and they taste amazing. Many of us eat healthy snack products that barely taste good, but we eat them because they fit our dietary guidelines. Well, you will eat the tasty pastry because it's delicious. In fact, we have more families now that buy the tasty pastry for their children. They give them to them for breakfast. They send them with lunch. The kids feel like they're eating junk, but they're not. And that is a testament to the taste of the tasty pastry. They come in so many different flavors. You will surely find 1 or 2 that you're crazy about. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary. Use the code SHR10 to save 10% off. I promise you, if you try them once, you will never want to be without them again. And now, without further delay, let's bring my guests on. I'm joined today by Dr. Elad Tako and Jacquelyn Cheng from Cornell University. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carl. It's a pleasure and honor to be here today.
So why did this work even have to be done? Don't we have the RDA for zinc? Isn't that adequate? Isn't that enough?
Right. Yes. Thank you. We do have the RDA for zinc. The context of the research stemmed initially from a challenge that is associated with how to appropriately measure zinc status, especially to try and differentiate between moderate and severe zinc deficiency. Over the years, the common biomarkers that were used to learn what is the physiological status of a person, specifically with zinc, were by either looking into plasma zinc concentration, urine, hair, nail zinc concentrations. And as about 8 to 10 years ago, it started to be very clear that these biomarkers are not necessarily stable, that they can be affected by other factors like inflammation that can potentially mask the zinc status of a person. And then considering the sophistication and complexity of zinc metabolism relative to iron, for example, with iron, it's very straightforward. There is pretty much only one transporter that we know of, which is divalent metal transporter 1 or DMT1, that is in charge of transporting iron from the intestinal lumen into the cell. With zinc, we're talking about more than 30 different transporters that are either on the luminal side of the enterocyte or the other side, and of course within the cell itself. So it became clear that there is a need to basically find more biomarkers that can more accurately measure zinc status. So in my research, this work started about 8 years ago. We started to look into what might be another physiological biomarkers that we can look into. So as you and your audience probably know, with iron, it's very simple. We collect a small amount of a blood sample, and then we look into hemoglobin. That gives us a really good idea what is the iron status of the subject. So we're looking into something similar with zinc in a tissue that we can collect, obviously. So again, we looked into blood, and specifically, we looked into conversion pathways that takes place in the red blood cell membrane, pathways of long-chain fatty acids, specifically the conversion of linoleic acid into the omega linoleic acid. And we knew that there is an enzyme that is called delta-6 desaturase that controls this conversion. And that enzyme is completely zinc dependent, meaning, or what we hypothesized was that under severe, at least, zinc deficiency conditions, this enzyme is not going to convert LA into DGLA.
Wow.
And that's how it started. The need to find something more accurate that allow us to more accurately measure zinc status. Now, zinc is, as you've mentioned, is a vital micronutrient. It's required for over 300 enzymatic actions. Approximately 3,000 proteins in the human body contain zinc as a cofactor. It's important for the nervous, reproductive, immune system, and a central role in development and growth. So zinc deficiency can be very devastating, especially to, in toddlers, children, developmental stage, older age. This is something that is becoming more and more present in the US, but it is a serious global issue, especially in developing region where the food diversification is an issue, infrastructure is an issue, the access to food, nutritious food is a problem. So zinc deficiency affects 30% of the global population. So we're talking billions of people, but in certain regions in Africa and South America, it can be much more than that. Because of some dietary challenges.
So what are some of the symptoms that one would see in what is considered clinical deficiency of zinc? And please, Jacquelyn, if you want to jump in and answer that, you can as well.
Go ahead, Jacquelyn.
Yeah, so I think Dr. Tako covered a lot of these. So the thing with zinc is that since it's necessary for, metabolism in general, there's not necessarily just one sign. So Dr. Tako talked about it's needed for immune function, skin I guess maybe Dr. Tako, you can elaborate a little bit more.
Sure, yeah. So some of the phenomena are associated with diarrhea, for example, as Jacquelyn mentioned, different rashes or different conditions that appear on the skin, loss of hair. These are the most immediate
Signs.
issues that may arise. Again, but it very much depends. It's very subjective. It very much depends on the subject, specific subject, circumstances, environment, etc.
So you mentioned earlier that inflammation can mask zinc status. So does that mean you have adequate zinc, but it's not measurable, or does that mean inflammation impairs zinc's ability to do what it's supposed to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. What it means that sometimes with zinc deficient subjects, sometimes these people also have a certain level or degree of inflammation. And inflammation will basically increase the concentration of zinc, for example, in the plasma. And then when you're measuring zinc in the plasma, it will basically give you the wrong impression, suggesting that the zinc status of the person is efficient. It's okay, but it's really not necessarily okay. So that's why it's important, because again, as I mentioned, the metabolism of zinc is so sophisticated and complex. That's why we know now that it's important to use more than just one biomarker. And that leads me to, what we are here for, this is why we came up with this idea of an index. Like, we know that just using LA to DGLA ratio, which was the physiological biomarker that we've developed, we know that it's great, it's working, but it's important to incorporate that and to include at least one more or additional biomarker to gain like a really good perspective and idea of what is the zinc status of a subject, especially again when we're talking about people that are moderately deficient, for example.
So it's long been known, at least to this audience, that zinc affects the P450 cytochrome enzyme cascade in a way that downregulates the aromatase enzyme, which then reduces the conference of testosterone to estradiol in men. And that's why when men eat, a dozen oysters, they get this super zinc influx, and their testosterone goes up and their libido goes up, and oysters make men want more sexual activity. But we also know, well, at least I do, and maybe some of the audience does, that the precursor to aromatase is cyclooxygenase, which is the primary inflammatory enzyme marker, COX-1, COX-2. And so does zinc play a role in suppressing inflammation, which means that if cyclooxygenase is downregulated, then the aromatase is downregulated? I've never understood whether zinc acted directly on aromatase or on an upstream enzyme, and does it play a role in squelching inflammation?
Yeah, that's an interesting question and clearly a very relevant pathway. I don't have a clear answer on that, to be honest. I think that again, it's very much subjective. It very much depends on the dietary circumstances and physiological circumstances of a subject. What you said with oyster is probably one of the best sources of zinc out there. So it explained a lot when it comes to some of the signs that you have mentioned. But again, we learn more and more that how we react to zinc, it's in our diet is very subjective. It depends what is the source of zinc. So for example, with oyster or from animal protein for that matter, zinc bioavailability is extremely high relative to zinc that is present in plant-based sources, where usually you will find certain inhibitors like phytate or phytic acid that can potentially block or basically chelate zinc and prevent its bioavailability. So you will find, like, for example, in certain legumes, beans, colored beans specifically, that zinc content, again, relative to a plant source, the concentration can be relatively high. But since you have those polyphenols or phytic acid, etc., the bioavailability is not that high, meaning that what is available for us, the tissue to absorb, is not a lot. So it very much depends on the dietary circumstances of the person. A person that eats everything relative to a person with certain dietary choices or restrictions, obviously, it will affect those people differently.
So we know that iron is better absorbed when it's hemi-iron. And does that seem to be the magic with zinc too? As you point out, I mean, red meat is a great source of zinc.
Correct.
And you can absorb a lot of the zinc in red meat. Correct. Is that hemi relationship part of the improve? Does it improve bioavailability for people when they eat it?
Correct. As you've mentioned, beef, red meat, oysters, crab meat, eggs are great sources of zinc. But again, for those that are vegetarian or vegan or other dietary restrictions or choices, so legumes would be a great, again, considering what they're eating, legumes would be a great source as well. For example, chickpeas are a great source of zinc.
So one of the things that will enhance plant-based iron's absorption is to have the plant-based iron in the gut at the same time as ascorbic acid. Mm-hmm. Vitamin C increases ferritin production in and of itself, and it makes a greater bioavailability of plant-based iron. Are there things that can improve the availability of plant-based zinc for those people out there who are maybe vegan?
Yes. It's as you said, it's mostly the source. So the best source for vegan to consume or make sure that they have enough zinc in their diet would be kidney beans, would be Great Northern beans, chickpeas, mostly legumes that are not red or black would suggest that they're very high in polyphenols, because again, polyphenols can potentially block or inhibit the bioavailability and absorption. Although they are, polyphenols are good for us,
right?
But when it comes to certain minerals, they can limit the bioavailability of especially iron and zinc when they are consumed. So that's why chickpeas and again, Great Northern beans are great sources of zinc for those that are vegan or vegetarians.
It's better it will absorb better. So how was your research designed? What did you do in order to ascertain the best way to understand the human need for zinc?
Right. So I'm a physiologist by training. I'm an animal scientist. This is my background, and as a scientist, I was always interested to better understand how certain dietary deficiencies are affecting not necessarily what we already know. So it started actually with iron. We know that dietary iron deficiency can lead to anemia, and we know that anemia is a very serious condition, and we know that we need to address it. But I also wanted to better understand how these deficiencies are affecting other factors, more specifically how they affect the functionality, how they affect the morphology and the microbiome of specifically the small intestine, which is the digestive and absorptive surface or location, specifically the brush-border membrane, which is, again, as I said, the digestive and absorptive surface. So it started with iron, and then later it became more and more related to zinc and zinc nutrition. It actually started in the context of international nutrition. Again, try to understand how we can alleviate zinc deficiency, iron deficiency in populations where those deficiencies are a great health concern, where again, the accessibility to a diversified diet is a problem, where the accessibility to animal protein is not something that is quite apparent. So it was very important to try and understand how we can alleviate these deficiencies by providing, for example, if certain populations in Rwanda, they eat a lot of beans, so how we can potentially improve the bioavailability by either working with collaborators that biofortified certain bean lines that are already consumed in these populations to increase the bioavailability by increasing the content of iron and zinc in the beans or maize, for example. But the context of how how this affects intestinal functionality, how it affects the morphology, how it affects the microbiome is something that we have developed very recently, specifically with the microbiome. And we are using a very unique in vivo model to investigate that. And we were able to demonstrate a direct link between zinc status and iron status, separately, of course, and how this is affecting the composition and function of the intestinal microbial profile or populations, and then to also demonstrate how a specific profile can potentially affect other metabolic pathways in the host. So, for example, we're able to demonstrate that zinc deficiency can also lead to a secondary vitamin A deficiency.
Really?
Yes. So this is something that
how is that? How does that happen? I mean, when we talk about vitamin A, we're talking about retinol
right.
palmitate.
Right.
Okay.
Right. What we were able to demonstrate is that under zinc deficiency conditions, the specific bacterial profile that is associated to this condition is also reduce the pathways that are associated in the host, reduce the pathways that are associated to with retinol metabolism. So that basically suggests, and this was something that was actually known. It was known that, it is very common to have in certain populations zinc deficiency that is also linked to vitamin A deficiency. But what we were able to do is to provide an explanation. It wasn't clear how, but we're able to show that the microbiome can be the potential explanation, again, under specific circumstances.
And then I would assume that microbiome diversity, or dysbiosis, probably occurs in people that have low zinc status, right? They have shifting changes. Is there a shift? So we know that the bacteroidetes and firmicutes have certain profiles for energy expenditure and energy absorption, and one tends to be found in higher populations in the obese, and one is found in higher populations in the lean. Is there a relationship with that lean phenotype versus obese phenotype and zinc?
Yeah, these are great questions. The association is not clear yet. It's not clear in the context of zinc status.
But what do you think now that you're digging into?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that Jacquelyn can maybe add to that. Absolutely, there is a link between the two. Absolutely, Jacquelyn, if you want to add anything, please.
Yeah. So just to add, zinc binding proteins make up about 5% of the bacterial proteome. So we know that certain bacteria require zinc to function. And in previous of our lab studies, we found that lack of dietary zinc can affect the populations of certain bacteria. So, for example, if someone's zinc deficient, their gut microbiome composition may be more heavily composed of bacteria that don't need zinc. But in addition to what bacteria are there, something we care about is what the bacteria are actually doing. So we saw that with zinc deficiency, we also saw changes in what bacteria produce. So bacterial metabolites such as short-chain fatty acid production is also altered with zinc deficiency. And with short-chain fatty acids in particular, they can contribute to mineral solubility by lowering the pH of the intestinal lumen and improving zinc bioavailability and uptake.
That's fascinating. There's a whole line of supplements coming. So for years, and we've talked about the microbiome probably for at least 10 years now on the show. For years, I would say the bugs in your body, in your gut, they eat the food that you feed them. And then they either poop out things that are good for you or things that harm you. Well, there's a whole class of supplements being launched right now called postbiotics, which is basically the things that microbes poop out. And they're just going right to the end product and putting these in supplements now. But the fascinating thing about this is you can shift the microbiome literally in a day by making dramatic changes to the diet. So I would imagine that if you are in fact zinc deficient, you could probably really help your microbiome by just starting to supplement with or eating more zinc-rich foods. Is this accurate?
It is accurate, but it will be easier, as Jacquelyn suggested, is to increase the fiber consumption. And by that, you are feeding your microbiome, you're creating creating environment that is more supportive of microbial population that produce short-chain fatty acids. And the production of short-chain fatty acids, this is one of the hypotheses that we have, the production of short-chain fatty acids will lower the luminal pH, which will improve the solubility and therefore bioavailability and absorption of factors like iron and zinc. So it's a combined approach that you can take. You can increase the consumption of foods that are rich in zinc or iron for that matter, but also increase your fiber consumption.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I want to take our first commercial break.
Sure.
When we come back, I want to start at the short chain fatty acid production by microbes in an environment where zinc is adequate, and I want to ask you about ketone production, because we know that the microbes in our gut can take short chain fatty acids and turn them into ketones, and some people have the ability to get into ketosis very quickly, and we're starting to understand that those who have, let's say, metabolic flexibility offered by their microbiome. So I want to know about zinc and ketosis and ketone bodies. Okay. So when we come, all right. So stay tuned. You are watching and listening to Superhuman Radio. We will be right back. Stay with us. I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/mypillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Redcon One's new BAR bar is the ultimate soft-baked protein-packed snack bar, powered by peanut butter. Perfect for while on the go to help curb hunger or sneaky sweet tooth cravings. With 20 grams of protein, use as a meal replacement bar or when you're in need of a high-protein snack. Eat a Redcon One bar as a midday snack or for fuel before an intense training session. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Redcon1 and use the code SHR25 and save 25% off these delicious bars today. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low carb.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where we use oxygen for the power of good.
Welcome back. We're changing places. So a lot of people endeavor the ketogenic diet these days, but not everybody can get into a deep state of ketosis. And a lot of times they have to abandon it. starting to realize that these people may have a microbiome that are not capable of producing adequate amounts of beta hydroxybutyrate. It takes two different microbes. One microbe makes a postbiotic that the other microbe eats, and it makes BHB. Does zinc play a role in the production of BHB in any way? Jacquelyn, you want to jump on that since you seem to have a good understanding of the microbiome? Do you want to answer that, or do you want Dr. Tako?
I think for this question, Dr. Tako would be better suited.
Okay. What do you think? Do you think that zinc plays a role in ketosis?
It's an interesting question. I'm not sure. I don't have a straight, I'm not a microbiologist, so I think that this is yet to discover the direct link. I do know, as we all aware, that ketosis is a situation. It's a situation where we don't have enough carbs in our diet, and then basically our body starts to use fat as an energy source, and this is what we're trying to achieve. With zinc and the association to the microbiome, I think that, again, it's very subjective, and with certain people where they see that it's not necessarily effective, or they don't get the results that they're after, or they have other challenges that or situations that they seem to have. I think that it's important to gain the perspective of their physician to learn what are their specific circumstances.
So the liver seems to be a battery. It doesn't just filter our blood, but it stores things that are very, very important to us, so that if we don't have access to them on a day in, day out basis, the liver will provide it. Is zinc stored in the liver?
Zinc is an interesting mineral. We don't store zinc in our cells in high amounts, at least, because zinc can potentially be toxic. So, for example, in the enterocyte, we have ZNT1, which is basically a transporter that is a zinc rescue agent. When the levels are getting to be too high, so ZNT1 start to basically export zinc from the cell into the blood to be able to basically get rid of the extra zinc that is there. So unlike iron, because iron it's very much studied in that context, that we have ferritin, for example, that ferritin is the cellular iron storage unit. Zinc is a little bit different than that.
Okay. So does your work, well, first of all, what did you ascertain in your work? So what did you determine that when you were looking at the appropriate human values for zinc? And I've got a graph here. I'm going to put this graph up. Maybe you can explain it to us.
Sure.
So what are we looking at here?
Sure. So I will let Jacquelyn to explain this, but this graph is basically the graphical abstract that we published as part of our recent publication that presents the concept of the zinc status index. And Jacquelyn, if you want to take it from here.
Yeah, sure. So maybe just going back a little bit. So we talked about how common zinc deficiency is, how it's estimated to affect up to 2 billion people worldwide. Well, zinc's been measured in humans since the 1940s, and to be honest, we're still looking for an accurate biomarker. So without an accurate and sensitive way to assess zinc status, we can't really know if treatments or interventions to improve someone's zinc status actually have an effect. Like Dr. Tako mentioned earlier, zinc metabolism is complex, and there's a really huge need for developing new and consistent biomarkers. So that's what led us to the zinc status index. So Dr. Tako talked a little bit about the first pillar. So that's the thing on the left. So that's the LA to DGLA fatty acid ratio. So with this fatty acid ratio, there have been several clinical studies in the past 5 years that have all had the same general conclusion, where they found that in these studies, regardless of the zinc source, degree of zinc deficiency, and across different populations, this fatty acid ratio was generally sensitive to changes in dietary zinc, while plasma or serum zinc, the most widely used zinc biomarker, was not necessarily reactive. So we've talked about the first pillar. So instead of just a standalone biomarker, why not use the LA to DGLA ratio as part of a multifactorial approach? So the second pillar is zinc-related gene expression. So we've seen that mild zinc deficiency can alter zinc transporter gene expression and zinc-dependent enzyme activity. So another of the biomarkers we considered looking at is what Dr. Tako mentioned, delta-6 desaturase. So this is a fatty acid desaturase enzyme. So this is the key enzyme involved in LA to DGLA fatty acid conversion. Since we know that this enzyme requires zinc to function, and in our animal studies, we found that this gene expression changed with dietary zinc intake, we thought that this was something that we could also add to the index. So to be frank, in our animal studies, we looked at the small intestine and liver, but we can't do this in humans. And since we know that the site of fatty acid conversion happens in red blood cells in humans, we could potentially look at red blood cell gene expression of this fatty acid desaturase enzyme. So finally, for the third and last pillar, it's the gut microbiome. We talked a little bit about this already. So we know that zinc bacterial enzyme, or bacteria need zinc to function. So about 5% of bacteria in the gut, we estimate that they need zinc to function. So this is the last aspect of the pillar. So since we saw that all three pillars were reactive to changes in zinc intake, we thought it'd be cool to create something that could accurately predict someone's zinc status. So we essentially took data from 5 of our studies and used them to train and create a statistical model for the zinc status index prototype. So from this model, we took only factors, so factors within 3 pillars that had predictive power. So with this index or equation, if we have any data for any of the 3 pillars, we could essentially accurately determine if someone is zinc adequate or deficient.
So do doctors have this available, the ability to do this, to do this kind of analysis on their patients?
Yes, so this study came out in late September, where we basically introduced this concept of using this index. The first pillar, as Jacquelyn mentioned, was the LA to DGLA ratio that is measured basically in a blood sample. It gained more and more attention, again, as Jacquelyn mentioned, over the past few years with clinical studies that were conducted with multiple populations, including a study in Benin and 2 studies that were conducted in Serbia, where they showed its effectiveness and ability to predict or to measure zinc status accurately. So we expect this biomarker specifically to be more and more used. The other 2 pillars that we've included, the microbiome and the delta-6 desaturase expression, is something that, yes, the technology is obviously available, so we expect this to be more and more common or to gain more and more attention by various platforms.
So what does this mean to the RDA? I mean, I guess what you're doing is kind of like what we've started to do with vitamin D over the past 8-9 years, right? We don't doctors say, oh, take 1,000 IUs of vitamin D a day and you're fine. Right. And for some people that's true and some people it's not, because when you start testing 25 hydroxy vitamin D, that's where you really learn if their supplementing is working. So what does this do to the RDA? Does this say the RDA is really not important? What's really important is to be tested for your zinc status?
I think that it's both. It's important to be aware how much zinc is required, because the zinc requirements, the daily requirements are going to change based on the person's age, gender, dietary circumstances. We know, for example, that the recommended adequate daily amount of zinc is different between men and women, adults, which is 11 milligrams relative to 8 milligrams. So it's very much important to know how much you need, but also to be tested to make sure that you're getting enough. So it's a combination of both. This is especially important because, again, our physiology is changing in age. It's changing due to chronic disease. It's changing due to what we eat, the dietary circumstances and choices. So it's very important to know what is your zinc status.
Are there things that we know, like there are certain things that if you take too much of one, it blocks the uptake of the other? I'm trying to think. I think copper competes with maybe magnesium or calcium. do we know anything about zinc in that nature? Like, do we know, like, hey, if you're really taking a lot of this, it's probably going to stop the absorption of zinc?
Yes. There is such a relationship between zinc and iron. For example, Jacquelyn, would you like to take it to answer this?
I mean, I was thinking about it from another angle, so you go ahead first.
Yeah. So we know, for example, as I've mentioned, that DMT1 is the major iron transporter in our intestine. So sometimes when there is more in the intestinal lumen, when there is more zinc relative to iron, so zinc will be, zinc will take an advantage, and basically, more zinc will be absorbed, and vice versa potentially. But Jacquelyn, go ahead. What was the other angle that you wanted to address?
I think just I was thinking zooming out even more. So I've been reading recently a few, I guess, microbiome and zinc excess studies. So this is not necessarily the question you asked, Carl, but like even zooming out, I mean, there's studies that talk about how excess zinc like changes your microbiome to be populated with highly of bacteria that are zinc dependent. But I think the issue with that is we've seen studies that talk about how excess zinc can make you more susceptible to like C. diff infection. I think adverse outcomes with newborns, like stuff like that. So I think you need to find like, for talking about the RDA, it's about finding like a good balance for each individual person in terms of their zinc intake.
If zinc competes with iron and someone's concerned about iron overload, like I've been in iron overload, I've had to start donating blood to get my iron levels down. Would taking zinc with a meal, let's say red meat, help block some of the iron uptake if they compete? No.
I think that it's very subjective. I don't think so. Because you are iron overload because you're very efficient in absorbing iron, and you eat a lot of, you include in your diet many sources that are very high in iron, and your body's very good in absorbing iron. So no.
Can you take too much zinc, right? Because I've heard people say, oh, you can never take too much zinc because the body will just flush it out. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
Again, it depends on the specific circumstances of the subject. So it's important with any such decision to consult with your doctor and make sure that you're doing the right thing. But potentially, yes. It's also important to stress that with different supplements that are available, the fact that the label says that it has X amount of zinc, which is 10 times more than what you need, doesn't necessarily mean that you're absorbing all of this, right? It means what is the bioavailability of the form that is used, the zinc form that is used in the supplement that you're taking. That's a major thing to think about, because most people, including myself, we look at the label and depends on what we're talking about, but we will assume that, okay, if it says X, we are absorbing at least most of that amount. It's not necessarily the case. It depends, again, what is the source, in what form zinc is included in the supplement, etc. Just like with any other mineral or vitamin, for that matter, that we consume.
Should you supplement with zinc? If I eat a pound of red meat a day, like, do I even need to supplement with zinc?
No, Carl. If your diet is balanced and you're including a sufficient amount of sources on your plate that are rich with zinc or other micronutrients, essential nutrients, if you consume enough of them on your plate, you don't need to supplement. Absolutely not. However, this can change with age, because as we get older, we become less efficient in absorbing these nutrients. So even if we eat enough, that doesn't mean that we're absorbing enough. So it's important to be aware of those limitations, and then of course to consult with your doctor to be tested, so you can make the adjustments as needed.
The way vitamin C enhances iron uptake, does it enhance zinc uptake?
Potentially yes, because it's a similar charge of iron. So yes, potentially yes. It was mostly tested specifically with iron. It was mostly tested in different, again, dietary context, in vitro. But in iron, it's very easy to do because we have ferritin, so we can measure ferritin synthesis as an indicator of iron bioavailability. We can't do that in vitro with zinc because, again, zinc is much more complex. But again, we can assume that it will contribute to its bioavailability. Yes.
Last question about supplementation. We're going to take our last break.
Sure.
if you are supplementing with zinc, is there a best time of day to supplement with it? And should you supplement with a meal? Should you take your zinc with the full meal as opposed to an empty stomach?
Yes. In general, it's recommended to consume those as part of a meal, before your meal, for example. That's the recommendation, yes.
Okay. And does it matter what time of day you supplement with zinc?
Not necessarily. I don't think that there is enough, like, a robust research that suggests like a specific time of the day. So no.
Okay. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll wrap up the interview. Stay tuned. You're watching and listening to Superhuman Radio. We shall return. Redcon One's new BAR bar is the ultimate soft-baked protein-packed snack bar, powered by peanut butter. Perfect for while on the go to help curb hunger or sneaky sweet tooth cravings. With 20 grams of protein, use as a meal replacement bar or when you're in need of a high-protein snack. Eat a Redcon One bar as a midday snack or for fuel before an intense training session. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Redcon1 and use the code SHR25 and save 25% off these delicious bars today. Microbes make up your immune system. That's why I'm really excited about P3OM. P3OM is a patented probiotic that might be the most effective probiotic ever developed. P3OM fights bad bacteria and strengthens immunity. Basically a germ-fighting superhero. But it also helps digestion, speeds up metabolism, and increases energy throughout the day. That's way more than I thought a probiotic could do. And just when I thought P3OM couldn't get any more powerful, I watched a video that you can find at shrnetwork.biz/P3-OM of this probiotic literally breaking down a piece of steak. After I saw that, I was all in. Here's some more awesome news. You can get 10% off P3OM right now by going to shrnetwork.biz/P3-OM and by using the coupon code SHR10. And if you order it and it's not everything that you thought it would be, they will give you 100% of your money back, no questions asked. So if you want to protect yourself from whatever bug is floating around this year and take your digestion to a new level, visit shrnetwork.biz/P3-OM and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off today. Have you been struggling to achieve results in the gym? Trouble sleeping through the night? Overwhelmed with stress or anxiety? Look no further than Infiniwell supplements. They have designed products to address specific needs like muscle growth, hormone balance, sleep, and anxiety from the first use. Infiniwell helps you live well. Go to shrnetwork.biz/bewell, that's BEWELL, and use code SHR20 and start living well today. Being superhuman means being conscientious about the choices we make. White Oak Pastures is superhuman when it comes to raising livestock. They're committed to animal welfare, land regeneration, and rural revival. They responsibly manage the entire process from the pasture to your doorstep. High quality, pasture raised, great tasting meat from a farm you can trust. Full nose to tail selections. They even have options for your pet. Go to shrnetwork.biz/whiteoak and use the code superhuman to save 10% off your entire first order. If you've listened to Superhuman Radio for any length of time, you know I'm a big proponent of peptides. One of my favorites is GHKCU, the blue copper peptide. It has the ability to repair and regenerate more youthful expression of skin cells, reversing the signs of aging. Restora Cell's Stem Cell Awakening Serum, along with their other products, contains potent formulations of blue copper peptides and only the highest quality organic ingredients. Superhuman Radio listeners can now save 25% site-wide. Go to shrnetwork.biz/blue and use the code SHR25. Remodel your skin today.
This is the Superhuman Channel, doing reps with the weight of the world.
Welcome back. We're talking with two Cornell University scientists about zinc status. Everybody talks about magnesium today. Magnesium's all the rage today. But you know, these minerals are designed to work together. I'm sure that zinc has effects on other minerals. just the way magnesium has effects on calcium and potassium and so on and so forth. And really, we're talking about zinc today, but this is just a more efficient way to measure zinc in humans that has some meaning. That has some meaning as far as the benefits of zinc being conveyed because you have adequate zinc in your body. So let's not lose sight of that, right? I don't want people to go out and just start downing zinc now, because it's important to add zinc to any other mineral you're eating. And if you are getting your minerals from your food, you may not need to supplement. I remember when about 8 years ago, they started telling postmenopausal women, take 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day. None of the doctors said, write down everything you eat in a day and let me look at it. Oh my God, you eat 4 cups of yogurt every single day? You drink milk all day long? You don't need a calcium supplement. You're getting more than enough. So always turn to food sources first for these things. And then if you find out you have some sort of gut issue where you're a malabsorber of a particular mineral, then you fill in. This is hard work. The USDA has a beautiful food database website. You can go there and put any food, every food, anything in there, and it will give you the complete macro and micronutrient breakdown of every food you're eating. The average person eats 9 foods a week in and week out. Go there, look at your current diet, and then see what you need to fill the gaps in on. My only concern is, and for 16 years of doing this show, every time we talk about a supplement, people just automatically run out and buy it and just start taking it. You may not even need it. And look, it may not hurt you. Like the good doctor said, you can't really take too much zinc because you won't absorb it or you'll flush it out. But why spend the money in the first place? What do you hope clinicians and lay people take away from your new method of measuring the target for zinc? I'm assuming you hope they start using it, right?
Yes. First of all, thank you for your words. And I completely agree with you. If your diet is balanced, if you're getting everything that you need from your diet, if you're aware of your status, then you don't necessarily need to consume extra supplements. I just want to emphasize specifically with zinc. Zinc is affecting approximately 12% of the general population in the US, and about 25% of the elderly are at risk of zinc deficiency because they don't absorb enough zinc from what they eat. So it's really important to know what is our zinc status so we're able to make those adjustments, dietary adjustments, or other adjustments in order to make sure that we're gaining enough zinc, because zinc is a cofactor of so many pathways, so many proteins in our body. What we're hoping to achieve is, first of all, to gain a better understanding of how to accurately measure zinc status so we can address potential deficiency in a subject, and to tailor a specific treatment that it takes under consideration the specific circumstances, physiological circumstances, dietary circumstances of the subject, of the person. So that this is the immediate effect that we're trying to gain here. More globally, how do we accurately measure or estimate the effectiveness of certain strategies that are aimed to battle dietary zinc deficiency in certain populations? How do we measure the effectiveness of a new bean variety that is zinc enhanced, or meaning biofortification? How do we measure that accurately? We need a way to know that if a subject is consuming these beans in Brazil or in any other location where beans are consumed on a daily basis and where zinc deficiency is a major health concern, we need to make sure that it's actually working. So for us to come up with a strategy that can potentially address this need and to provide a reliable tool to measure the efficacy of these strategies is important. It's essential. So this is where we are with this at the moment. There is a lot of interest, again, as I've mentioned, specifically with the LA to DGLA ratio, the initial biomarker that we have developed, because it's been out there for a while, to use that or to include that as a biomarker when we test the efficacy or effectiveness of some of these dietary approaches. And one example that I can give you is a study that came out in 2019 a paper that came out in 2019 of a study that was conducted in Benin. Benin is a country that there is a moderate risk relative to neighboring countries. It is in a moderate risk of zinc deficiency. Certain populations, clearly children, are more vulnerable for dietary zinc deficiency. And what they were trying to do is to demonstrate if adding zinc to drinking water is going to improve zinc status. And they included the LA to DGLA ratio as one of their biomarker to basically measure if this approach is working, and it was working. So to be able to contribute to the field in that context where we can accurately measure how intervention strategies are working or not is extremely important and relevant.
So that one test is adequate for the average physician to ascertain what the real zinc status is. They don't have to use all of the other two pillars as well, right?
Again, it depends on the circumstances. We know that under certain circumstances, it's not going to be an option to collect these samples and to conduct all of these analyses. So under optimal circumstances and conditions, we recommend to use at least two of these as biomarkers to better understand what is the specific zinc status of a subject. Specifically, in addition to the LA2D-GLA, the microbiome is something that we very much recommend, because by profiling the microbiome, we can gain more information, not necessarily just in the context of zinc, but in the context of other conditions that are there and the subject is not necessarily aware of.
So to be fair to physicians and accessibility to insurance to run tests, the first two pillars would be really good because they're both dependent on blood, on red blood cells, right?
Correct.
I mean, okay. So I think what would be a great thing is for someone from Cornell to reach out to Quest Labs and all of these different labs, these commercial labs, and give them the assay. Say, this is how you measure it, and let them sell it to the doctors who will then prescribe it to the patient. Because I don't see doctors ordering these individual tests and then taking your formulary and sitting at their desk and calculating. They have no time to do that. But if Quest Labs said, hey, we have the new zinc status test, they'll order that. So really, you need to get to Quest and all these commercial labs and say, you guys need to start ordering this to physicians. They want it.
Absolutely, I agree with you. What we did is to present that concept based on our research, and now we're in the process to basically allow people to understand what is the advantage, and then to potentially develop the appropriate technology that will make it more accessible. Absolutely. All of the information that we included in the Zinc Status Index paper basically goes back to previous papers that we've already published, where we demonstrate how we develop the LA2D-GLA ratio, where we talk about how zinc status is affecting the microbiome, how it's affecting the expression of delta-6 desaturase. So the methodology is there. We just put the pieces together, incorporate that into a formula that is part of the index, and now we can take it to the next level. So this paper basically concludes the research that we have conducted over the past 7 to 8 years, and now we're trying to get to the place that we can implement this resource in a more effective way.
And last comment we're going to post from, this is on YouTube. I'm sorry, Dr. Tako, I'm going to end up covering part of your face up here for a second.
Sure.
This is from Forest for the Trees. He's watching on YouTube. And this is funny because I had copper pipes in Queens when I was a young boy. He says, I have a theory on copper pipes being installed in houses during the 60s, and after depleting zinc due to high copper. The previous water pipes were galvanized, which leached zinc into the water. The new copper pipes didn't. I can look back at my yearbook from high school in the 80s, and I can see how the farm kids were much more masculine, even the girls, than the kids who lived in the subdivisions. Just a thought. What do you think about that? Copper leaching out of pipes and into drinking water. Do you think that there's a possibility of that?
I don't know. I mean, I think that it's a very interesting observation. Potentially, maybe. But I think that it's very much relevant, very much dependent on the specific circumstances. What is the physiological status of the person and circumstances, dietary circumstances, other conditions that can affect the metabolism at that age. I think that it's very subjective.
Yeah. I wanted to, Jacquelyn, you didn't really get a chance to talk. I'm sorry. I hope I haven't censored you by accident here today. I want to thank both of you for being on, Dr. Tako and Jacquelyn Cheng. This is fascinating. And I really think it's important. And I think that years from now, we're going to see labs offering this new form of a zinc status test. It's very important. Very, very important. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting us. Our pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Take care. All right. And that's it for today. Let me think. Friday. Yes, we do have a show tomorrow. In fact, the show we were supposed to have on Monday will be happening on Friday. We will be talking about comparing the quality of protein in the new non-meat, all plant-based burgers versus a real beef burger. And this will be very fascinating because there's a lot of people out there who are convinced that that the plant-based burgers are just as good as the meat-based burgers. Ironically, the company that markets the most popular, if that can be considered the most popular plant-based burger, reported huge losses, like 120, maybe 120 million. They're right now, for every dollar in sales, it costs them $1.25. These burgers are not popular. People don't want to eat them. Bill Gates wants us to eat them. That's for sure. He really does. I'm not just saying that as a joke. Bill Gates is promoting these plant-based burgers. Why, I don't know. He should have stayed in his lane. You know, it's funny. He should have just made computers less virus or more virus resistant instead of starting to focus on vaccines and food and stuff like that. But I guess when you got billions of dollars and you really have nothing else to do, you start piddling around in other areas that you don't belong. But tomorrow we're going to compare the quality and bioavailability of these two different burgers, the natural beef-based burger and the new plant-based burger, and it should be fascinating. So hopefully you could show up for that. Don't forget, always share the show. Share the show, because if you help one person, if you get information to one person, and it actually, I have no idea what Dorothy Hamilton is saying. Vark Tech. I don't know what that is, Dorothy, but thanks for stopping by. If you share the show and someone listens to it and they go and they check their zinc levels and they find out that they're zinc deficient, they start supplementing with zinc, and all of a sudden, a lot of little niggling effects, problems that they had just start to go away. Think about that. You help. If we can help one person with the show, then I'm happy. We've done our job. So please share the show whenever possible, and we will see you tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. And thank you for being here today.